couple days ago, I put up a post on my community page asking all of you for your favorite confusing or unique adventure and dual sport riding terms. I thought that was just going to be one video, but man, did you all deliver. And I have 5 or 6 pages of just terms that apply specifically to dual sport and adventure riding and motorcycling in general. So instead of one video, we're going to try to do multiples. Today's video is dual sport and adventure riding terms specific to riding situations, terrain, and techniques. These are my personal definitions based on experience. There is always some regional variation in these slang terms and some variation based on your background. If you came from street riding, you're going to have different definitions than you are if you came from MX riding. So I'm sure people will disagree. That's great. Leave your versions and interpretations in the comments. Let's make this a place where people can come and get the information that they're looking for when they hear a weird term and don't know what it means. I'm going to go quickly here because there's a ton of these terms. Okay, let's roll. So we're going to start with terms for terrain situations, things that your motorcycle tires will roll over on, through, and around. And they're in alphabetical order by category. First one is baby heads. That was the example my wife used that inspired this whole video. Baby heads are small-ish rocks about the size of a baby head. That's why they're called that. They're generally round-ish and or smooth, and they're specifically defined because riding on them is a specific kind of butt pucker because they move and shift and roll around. It's a very unnerving type of surface to ride on because it's kind of unpredictable and scary. So that's why baby heads have their own term. A berm is a banked corner. You generally see these out in trails. You see them on MX tracks, but a lot of times people will either dig up a berm from taking corners aggressively and or you'll just see them up on the side of the hill. But anytime basically you have a corner that's banked and you can use it to get up and keep your speed through a corner, that's generally referred to as a berm. Flowy is generally referring to a trail or a road or a series of corners and turns and obstacles that you can just kind of keep your momentum and flow through. That hence it's called flowy. There's not a lot of stopping and starting, not a lot of, oh, I need to aggressively slow down to tackle this steep obstacle and then speed up to get up this hill. You're generally just flowing, cruising. The luge section on the Oregon BDR is a great example of flowy. G-out is one you've probably heard, but you don't really understand until you experience it. A G-out is when your bike's suspension becomes fully compressed due to gravity, hence the G. This usually happens when you're going down a steep hill and it either flattens out abruptly, or you're going down a steep hill and then it immediately flattens out and then goes right back up another because your bike's momentum is in a downward direction and you're rapidly changing direction. And so your bike will compress and your back will also compress in some cases if you hit those G-outs too quickly. Hard enduro is a term I see thrown around a lot. Enduro used to mean just a dual sport motorcycle. It's sort of shifted and the definition has changed. The best way to describe it is to go look at a hard enduro race. Those are guys riding up steep cliffs and on the gnarliest, most craziest trails that you would struggle to even walk up as a normal mortal human. Some of the stuff that I've done in Canada could be classified as hard enduro, but I suck at it. I'm not a hard enduro rider, but you see those riders that scale cliffs like mountain goats, stuff with big rocks and big ruts, that is hard enduro. Usually on a dirt bike, not so commonly on a dual sport, but it does happen. I don't think I've ever seen hard enduro on an adventure bike except for some of the Poltaris stuff. Off-road is a term that is hotly debated and people disagree with me all the time. To me, emphasis on me, off-road means non-paved. If you're not on the asphalt or concrete, you are off-road because the surface is loose and your riding skills on the street don't really apply. Off-road riding techniques that you're using on a gravel road are pretty similar to what you use in any kind of loose situation. So to me, off-road is off-pavement. Those two terms can be used interchangeably. Others will disagree and say a gravel road is still a road, which okay, but I've been on some gravel roads that I couldn't drive a four-wheel drive up, so does that still count if it's technically a road? Jeep Trail is technically a road if you look at a map. I don't know, that's up for debate, but to me, when I talk about off-road and off-road riding techniques, gear, and motorcycles, I mean off-pavement. Off-camber is another term that you'll hear a lot, and that is when you're riding on a hillside. So the hillside's like this, and in a rig, in a car, you would be at this angle, right? But in a motorcycle, hold on, let me do it this way. On a motorcycle on an off-camber hill, we are still vertical. We remain vertical, we can do that. It also can refer to just like crossing a steep hillside without a trail dug through it that is flat, and so you're off camber. One side of your tire is being required to grip a hell of a lot more than the other. Different types of roads and trails. Let's talk about single track. Single track in general, in my experience, and my personal definition is motorcycle only. It's not wide enough for a side-by-side or a quad, and generally narrow enough to only allow motorcycles to go single file. You can't ride right next to somebody. You may be able to pass pass and get around people, like when one is stopped or whatever, but riding side by side, not possible. 2-track, for me, this is a road or a trail that is overgrown in the middle but has 2 ruts. Think about it like a rough Jeep trail or a rough road, but it can also kind of refer to just a trail, the width of a car, basically, of a 4x4 out through the desert or whatever. That is 2-track, but 2-track is generally a lot rougher than a road in my experience, or at least in my definition. Speaking of roads, forest road, forest service road, fire road, logging road, these are all kind of interchangeable. They're generally graded, often maintained, although not regularly, but the idea was that trucks, logging trucks, and other rigs without 4-wheel drive have driven on them or will drive on them, so they generally connect from point A to point B. The idea being it's either used for logging or it's used for access by firefighters when the fire is way deep in the backcountry. They need some way to get there. Those are a great road to start on. So when I say logging road, forest service road, gravel road, often I'm referring to this, although there are different types of gravel roads. So like a fast gravel road is flat like a gravel highway, like you would have no problem going 60 miles an hour on it, but there are all other types of gravel roads that are much slower. The only common denominator there's gravel on the road. A dirt road is another kind of blanket term that's often used to mean just not pavement, but also can specifically mean a road that is a hard-packed dirt surface, no gravel on top of it, something that's kind of just bushwhacked out through the bush. Ruts and rutted out are terms that you hear a lot. So a rut is when a tire spins in the mud and digs a rut. So it'll be a width of a tire and deeper than an inch or two. Suddenly you're dealing with ruts. A rutted out road is a road that has had that happen a lot. On motorcycles, often if it's super rutted out, you either have to tightrope walk the middle or just commit to riding up the ruts. 4x4s and side-by-sides destroy roads with ruts this way when they're super muddy because they just spin their tires aggressively to get uphill. Motorcycle riders are also guilty of this. I see this on the trails that get muddy all the time, but a rut is, it just depends. There are motorcycle width ruts, there are vehicle width ruts, and they're not that fun to try to navigate in and out of. It's an obstacle you have to dodge that adds some complexity to your riding. Oh, and speaking of roads, the other thing I didn't mention was trails. What is a trail? It depends on who you ask. So for me, a trail is out at an OHV, that is off-highway vehicle area. So it's for ATVs. It just kind of goes out through the wilderness. Or a trail that someone has built through the wilderness. It's not a road, it was never a road. Some people will watch my videos and say, I'm so jealous of those trails you're riding, and it's really just logging roads and stuff, but they don't have those all over the world. So we're very fortunate out here in the West, in the United States. Other places, all they have is roads like that, and so they call them trails. So trail is a very broad definition depending on who you ask. Switchbacks are very tight, zigzaggy roads with very sharp, often 180-degree corners on the end. Usually that's because you're ascending or descending quickly. So when you start to see that zigzag pattern coming up on your map, you know you're either going up or down pretty quickly most of the time. They can be challenging because you have to carry speed. The corners are often off camber. A step up or a step down to me is I'm riding along a road and there's a step. Literally, it looks like a step. So there's a rock that is 8 inches higher, 6 inches higher, even 4 inches higher, I would consider a step. Riding up that is a step up. Riding down that is a step down, in my definition. Tar snakes is not something you see in the backcountry, but you'll see it on the pavement. It's when they've sealed cracks in the pavement with tar and it heats up in the summertime, and when you come across it, particularly when you're cornering, you start to slide. Whoop! The traction is uneven and you hit that tar snake and you shift over an inch and you crap your pants because it's real scary. That's what a tar snake is. That's why when people say I hate tar snakes, it's because they screw up your traction. Twisties is another street term that you'll hear, but we as dual sport and venture motorcyclists, everyone loves twisties. So twisty is just a curvy, windy mountain road, usually 2-lane highway where you really can get in and lean into the corners and enjoy yourself riding fast. You don't see that on the interstate, but if you get off the interstate and start taking some of the lesser known older mountain passes, you'll run into some twisties. Washboard is either when runoff has caused a ripple effect on the road, usually a gravel or dirt road, or more often here you see it when they've run a grader or a piece of equipment up a logging road and the tracks create these tiny little ruts, and so they're basically tiny whoops, which we'll talk about in a second, but that's what a washboard road is, and it's called that because riding across it feels like running something across a washboard. It's very you either have to go super fast where you stay on top of it or slow down so you're not getting bounced and having your teeth rattled out of your head. Washout is a term that has multiple definitions. So one, a washout on a road is where water has come in and caused a landslide. Either a partial washout where it's just like the corner of the road, or like on the Washington BDR where it's washed out whole sections of the road and you have to like ride down into the washout and back up the other side. Anywhere where water has kind of partially destroyed a road is generally referred to as a washout. Now, there's also the front end washout, which is what happens when you're riding and you either don't get your weight farther forward enough on the bike or you pull the front brake too much and the front end just slides and you crash. I have a lot of experience with front end washouts. Whoops is a term that is used to refer to gently undulating roads, terrains, and trails, say a series of 2 to 4 foot bumps that are about 2 to 4 feet apart. So you're either slowly kind of meandering up and down them, or you're hitting it hard and kind of skipping across the top. I also call them whoops because often when I'm riding them, I'll hit it too fast. The tank bag will tag me in the balls. And so it's whoops, I smash my balls. That's usually what comes out of my mouth when I'm riding whoops, but it's kind of a motocross term, but it's anytime you have that undulating series of small moguls caused by tire spin and all kinds of other factors. And then finally, in the terrain definition section of our ADV vocab list, woods riding versus open riding, aka trails versus desert. There's a different type of bike required and a different type of setup. So if you live in a place where you only have wide open desert or you don't have tight forest trails like we have here, you're not going to understand the difference, and vice versa. We don't get a lot of open riding out here unless we go to the desert in eastern Oregon. Woods riding is a lot of tight meandering between trees and single track, maintaining your speed, using the clutch a lot to get up hills and back down the other side while going over kind of technical, undulating, difficult terrain. Open riding is more like, hey, look, I see a mountain on the horizon and there's a road that goes straight to it. I'm gonna go wide open throttle for an hour and get there. A lot of that like in Baja, in the desert in eastern Oregon, in Mojave, in Death Valley, but you need a different bike setup. I always say the CRF 450 RL is an open riding bike, right? That's more of a desert riding bike because it loves the high revs for long periods of time. It does not like the slow revs up and down, the technical tight slow stuff. So woods riding versus open riding, two different types of riding. I originally set out to make this video about 3 different categories. It's already 15 minutes of film time, so I'm guessing that's at least 10 minutes of video. So I'm gonna stop here. And I guess if people are interested, if this video does well, if people like it, I will continue making a series about riding situations. And there's another category of just terms for crashes, which we could do a whole video on. Please add your terms for riding terrain, situations that you may encounter on your motorcycle, stuff that you have to ride over, around, or through in the comments below, and let me know if you want to see more in this series. This one was fun to make and put together. Hopefully you're enjoying it. Hopefully you learned something, so now you can go to your next rally and know what you're talking about, or at least when someone says something, you can nod like you know, and you will actually know what they mean. Please consider subscribing to the channel for more informational ADV and dual sport content, moto camping content, and other bike reviews and all that stuff. And if you want to support the channel while shopping at Revzilla, Moto Camp Nerd, Butler Maps, Amazon, Moscow Moto, Cyclops, Flying Eyes, any number of other places. There are links to all those in the description and a pinned comment. Click that link, costs you nothing extra. It only takes you 5 extra seconds and you can support this channel and this content without really trying. Thank you to everyone who has done and continues to do that. And thank you for watching this video. I appreciate you, and please do not forget to be excellent to each other. Thank you.